Hi, welcome to the second talk of 5 short talks on how to save the world. The title of this group is Solving the Economic Environmental Crisis. The connection between economics and environment is pretty obvious. Unfortunately, it's an inverse relationship. The more the environment suffers, unfortunately, the more the economy roars ahead. And the more we prosper, the more the natural environment gets wasted. And this is unsustainable. We entitled this Solving rather than Fixing because fixing is a short-term way of dealing with problems. For example, we try to deal with the carbon buildup in the atmosphere by making electric vehicles or wind turbines. But these each have their own problems, and they add to the overall environmental problem, even though they might fix or reduce one aspect of the problem. So we're interested not in the short-term fixes, but in a long-term solution. And for that, in the first talk, we went all the way back to the beginning of life 3.8 billion years ago, and traced it in a way to the present. And we imagined that if we extended our arms left and right, that life began at the fingertips of one hand, then we at the present are at the fingertips of the other. And we showed that human existence in that long span of time is basically the 16th of an inch that we would trim off from our fingernails. That's all of 3 million years of human existence. And we traced briefly how that worked. In the first 2.8 million years of human existence, we dropped down from trees. We figured out how to live on land to make tools and weapons and clothes and fire. And after about 2.8 million years, we had enough confidence, especially with the bow and arrow, that we could set off, leave Africa, and start migrating around the world. And everywhere we went, there were, at that time, megafauna, large animals that had never seen humans, had no fear of us, and wherever we went, there was a ready supply of meat. However, in that 200,000 years of migration around the globe, we basically drove most megafauna extinct. The only ones that survived were either in very remote places or in huge enough groups like the bison that they were more than we could take on. Then we began, after 200,000 years, we began to settle down, and that's the period we're in now, where we started to make houses no longer out of sticks and grasses, things, but were permanent, out of stone. And that expanded until we made plazas out of stone, and then roads out of stone, and then theaters out of stone, the Greeks and the Romans, colosseums out of stone, temples out of stone. And that gets us up through the Middle Ages. And then about 250 years ago, we figured out how to harness nature to help us expand even more rapidly with the steam power and what's called the Industrial Revolution. And that was just 250 years ago. So let's get to the present. Even during that period of industrialization, as we're building factories and much larger buildings, we weren't having a tremendously adverse effect on the whole environment of the planet. When I was a kid, the only environmental problems were litter, paper, bottles, and cans. And paper was made of pulp, that is trees. Bottles were made out of sand. Cans were made out of iron. They rusted. Everything returned back to Earth. They caused no damage. And now we have carbon built up in the atmosphere. We have seas rising, we have corals dying, we have species going extinct at a phenomenal rate, about 140,000 species a year. And it's gotten to the point where we're at a position where it seems about to collapse, and there's a great deal of fear. So let's go back to the beginning of this 20,000 years, this current period we're in, the period when we settled down and started to build things permanently, and look what is it about this what is the poison, if you will, in human nature that is causing so much environmental damage. There are three characteristics of the building in the beginning of that 20,000 years ago. The first was we wanted things that were permanent. We had never had permanence before. We were always migrating. Everything we made rotted, decayed, broke. So we started building houses out of stone and plazas and all the rest of it. The second thing, we started to make things that were, for the first time ever, larger than ourselves. Everything previously had been smaller than ourselves. And this called upon primarily men to build buildings, plazas, temples, coliseums, and so forth. And the third thing is that we wanted to make sure that nature was excluded from whatever we had land or spaces we had captured from her. So our walls became more impervious. When we captured land for farming, we protected it more and more first with animals, and then with our own selves, of course. And then in the current age, we've been protecting it with biocides, insecticides, herbicides. We've gotten to the point where we've been excluding nature from whatever we captured from her, whatever lands we captured, whatever spaces we captured, so that we, even from our own bodies with antibiotics, we've said, nature, stay out. As a result, with all of the compounding, we've come to the point where we've pushed back nature to the point where she is in decline. Imagine, if you will, that you had a glass that was 3/4 full of oil, and that oil represented life itself. And if you pour some water in, the water sinks to the bottom, and the oil starts to rise in the glass. And the more you pour water in, the more the oil rises. If you include in that the water now is carbonated with, ironically, carbon dioxide, and then the oil starts to spill over the side and run down the side of the glass, well, that's where we are now. We look out through the glass and we see that nature is falling out of the glass and running down the sides. And even though that isn't affecting us now, it may very, very well do it soon. Another way to look at it is to imagine that we were 20,000 years ago, we were a young child running along. And as we ran, we grew and we got bigger and bigger, and we could see further, and we had more confidence. And then we noticed, but we still wanted to get higher. And we noticed that, or thought, if we got hold of a long stick, we could use that and propel ourselves into the air. And so imagine that this 20,000 years is like the running of a pole vaulter going towards the goal. And you plant the pole and you swing upwards and your feet get above your head, and now you're upside down. And you then are in this period above the bar where you're weightless. and you have a tremendous view, and the world is just, you are at the peak. Well, that's where we are economically, socially. We are at the peak. We each live in, developed countries at a standard higher than most kings ever lived. No king ever had 100 horses fully harnessed and ready to go at the turn of a key. No kings in the past had hot and cold running water, had food at the store in abundance. So we are in a period of extraordinary prosperity. Now imagine that we're that pole vaulter again. We're above the bar. And we know that we have separated ourselves to such a large degree from nature. We are so far away from it, and that we're going to come down. And the question is, are we going to come down on the padding, have a soft landing, and continue? Or are we going to land outside of the soft landing and break apart? Well, if we know that if we hang on to the pole, then we will knock the bar off, and all of the prosperity that we have experienced, all of our gains will be destroyed. And if we hold on to the pole, we will be leveraged away from the padding and land out on the track or back where we came from, neither of which is particularly attractive. And so we want to understand, how did we get here in this heightened place? And it was clearly that stick. And let's look at that stick and consider that our economic system. It is our economic system which has catapulted us to such extraordinary wealth and prosperity. And if we do not let go, and if we do not find another way, then we will crash the whole thing. So in the third talk, we will talk about economics. Thank you.